Video and turn off sound on Facebook. Okay.
It's so wonderful just to be able to talk to you guys tonight.
This
is so much fun.
We're gonna have so much fun.
You know, our Facebook friends don't know that we've already been chatting a little bit, you know?
Right.
And so that's really been a fun chat. We've had a,
Okay, you guys, we're
I'm
live.
getting hooked on it. Wonderful just to be able to talk to you guys tonight. This is so much fun.
I have so much fun.
You know, our Facebook.
I just turned mine off.
Okay.
We're good.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
I'm so glad you're here. You're
Yeah.
gonna keep us straight.
I'm excited to be here. I'm honored to be here.
Oh,
You're gonna keep us straight. When my brain doesn't remember something, then that's your job. You're gonna have to say, plug it in. You know?
right.
There is no way I can keep you four straight.
Oh.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. I think you're right, Bob, actually.
Bob, what do you have in the background there?
Well, there's a scrapbook from the 1950s, and then this is Symphony Week, 1951, and then I've got a few CDs, you know, to show, like this one here. You remember this one?
Oh,
Wow, yeah.
You know one thing. Oh, is it okay to mention this?
Sure.
and
Oh,
so that's
I didn't know for we should have also added to the timeline the 2,000-pound bells that they use for the
Oh,
Berlioz.
yes, the Berlioz bell.
Yeah,
Okay. Hey,
yeah.
you guys, we are populated, and
Right.
I think we're going to start. It's 8:02. Danny says hi. My daughter is on. Eugen Lee is on. So we are live, and we just want to say hello to everybody and welcome all our longtime supporters, board members, ASO course members, ASO retirees, who we also contacted through Carl Nitsche. Some of our newest ASO members, we have 6 new players today this season. Our Bravo members, which are our young professional group, and all the ASO groupies out there, because we know there are a lot of those as well. We want to welcome you all, and thanks for joining us on this 7th installment of Backstage Banter, which is a live conversation between the musicians in the ASO. And we have invited, Emily Griebach usually does this, our English horn player, but this evening, I am going to be the moderator. Wish me luck. And I'm the second, but my name is Laura Najarian. I'm the second bassoonist in the ASO. I got into the orchestra in 2005 under Robert Spano's tenure. And we'll introduce everybody. Everybody's going to introduce themselves in just a second. And we're just want to say we're mixing it up a little bit this week because we normally do a backstage banter that involves the musicians chatting with Emily Griebach, mostly from the same section. Laura has done one, I've done one. And this week we invited our ASO archivist, Bob Scarr. Bob, wave your hand. That's Bob, looking dapper. And we have Laura Ardan and Rhonda Respis and Bruce Kenny, and they'll all introduce themselves in just a second. But I just want to say that we're going to feature recollections and stories that we've been on a journey already through 3, I think, Zoom calls, trying to kind of get our banter together and all of that. And we added Bob to the mix, and it's just been so much fun getting to know each other. We're talking about the evolution of the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra from our roots as the original Atlanta Youth Orchestra to today's ASO International Recording Orchestra. And we want to make sure that we also encourage everybody to ask questions in the chat. And I will try to keep track of those as well. And we'll ask those questions live to the members of the orchestra here and Bob. Why doesn't everybody just go around, starting with Laura and then Bob, talk about yourself just a little bit, say who you are, what you play, and when you started in the orchestra.
My
Since we're
goodness.
talking about the history.
Do I have to? Okay. So
Yes, you
Laura
do.
Ardan, I play principal clarinet, and I started in 1982, and Robert Shaw hired me. So
Great. Fantastic. Bob, you want to take over?
I certainly do. I started working at the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra in 2010. And I was in a fellowship program in the development area, and then later on we worked to start the archives, which I need to at some point tonight. Hopefully, I can tell a little bit of story of how all that came together.
Oh,
But it's
yeah.
been a wonderful 10 years. I've been able to merge my occupation with my avocation. Had a wonderful career at Delta Airlines, and I'm a musician, trombone player, and I've been able to continue that throughout the years. So I'm happy
Wonderful.
to be here, and thank you for inviting me.
Oh, absolutely. Rhonda, you want to take over?
Sure. My name is Rhonda Respis, and I'm the oldster in this group. I came in playing violin in 1968, which was the second year, I think, Bob, it's the second year that Shaw was a music director. I think
Right.
he had been there before, but it's the second year of music director. And I came out of Indiana University, and I've had the best ride in the whole world for 50 years.
Wonderful, wonderful. And Bruce, glad to have you very much.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I'm Bruce Kenny. I'm fourth horn with Atlanta Symphony. And yeah, I joined in 1985. So I played the last 3 years of Shaw's music directorship. And so this is, I think, my 36th year.
Amazing.
There are some 12 or so people ahead of me on the seniority list still. So I don't really feel like an old timer yet, but you know, gray beard aside.
Yeah, we've got, I'm just looking at the chat now, and Kay Gardner is on. Ernie Tovar, who was a horn player that was with us and is now playing in Philly. Ginny Respis is on. Carl Nitchie, our former principal bassoon. Ginny is Rhonda's daughter. And Carl Nitchie is also on. Danny Laufer, Denise Dumais, and Stephen Nash, who is definitely a groupie. Hi, Stephen.
Hi, Stephen.
Yeah, so we're gonna during this time we're gonna have a talk about and something that we've been doing for the last, I don't know how many weeks, you guys, just trying to come up with a way to talk about things that are really important to us that we want to convey. We want to acknowledge the people who have gotten us to this point. We want to just inform people who are new that might not know all that this orchestra has done. But you know, we want to acknowledge board members and longtime supporters and patrons and the music directors who provided the direction and what we're calling institutional momentum of the ASO that brought us to where we are today. So I just want to say that one of the reasons I really wanted to do this was because I've seen Bob for years now, and his infectious love of the ASO and truly supportive patron and cheerleader, just the biggest cheerleader for the orchestra. Every time you see him in the hallways, he'll say, "Hey, Laurel, can I show you something? Can I show you what I have?" You know, Bob, tell us what you have in the back right now.
Oh,
You
well,
have
this
something
is
just over your shoulder.
yeah, this is a poster from 1951. It's Symphony Week, which I think we probably need to have a Symphony Week real soon here. But it was September 16 through 22. Picture of Henry Sopkin, and this is orchestra here at the Municipal Auditorium.
Oh, fantastic! Wow, that looks like a homegrown poster, doesn't it?
Pretty much so.
Yeah. That's before anything was digital.
Right.
That's fantastic. So we're going to start, basically, how would you guys describe this? We're going to kind of use the 4 music directors of the ASO as a timeline of how we all progressed, how things changed in the orchestra, how things evolved from the youth orchestra that it started as. And is that a good assessment of how we want to talk about this? Okay. So And along the way, I want you guys to jump in with stories, because the stories about the people are the things that I find so interesting. And I have learned so much chatting with all of you, because this is my 16th season in the orchestra, but there's a lot of stuff I don't know about, and it's just been fascinating and so rewarding for me to hear you talk about all the wonderful things that you've experienced, and the changes that we've gone through, and then Bob jumping in with all the little details about just things you can't even imagine. So jump in wherever.
Okay.
We're going to start with some Sopkin years. Henry Sopkin was our music director of the Atlanta Symphony, the very first music director of the Atlanta Symphony from 1945 to 1966. These dates are on my computer right now, on a note, a little sticky note, so I know. And Henry Sopkin came from Chicago, right, Bob?
Yes, he did. And he was the let's see, he worked for Carl Fisher Publishing Company as a music editor and the Mills Music Company. So yeah, he was a graduate of I think it was the American Conservatory located in Chicago, something like that. But yeah, and he came down early in 1943 and 44 to conduct the what they at that time it was called the In and About Atlanta Orchestra, which we'll talk about here when you're ready.
Yeah, no,
There was a lot of women in the orchestra then, weren't there?
Yeah,
Because all the men were at war.
They're at war.
Yes?
Exactly. And Rhonda, to your point, Sopkin obviously is a very important figure here, but it's even more important to mention the three remarkable women that put all this together from 39 to 44. But before that, I would love to just take 2 minutes.
Yes.
To just there were, and this is a reflection on how remarkable these women were. There were at least 3 or 4 startup orchestras in the 20s and maybe early 30s, and I'm not going to get into the details on all 4 of those.
Back when I was in 2nd grade.
Yeah.
Come on, Bob.
Yeah. But I do want to talk about one, and it was from 1923, I think, to 1927. By the way, Franklin Garrett was the official historian here for Atlanta, and there's a lot of research in his books about these early startups. But it was called the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra, and Bruce, as you mentioned the other day, Enrico Lidi was the conductor. He was a famous cellist, right, Bruce? And he traveled throughout Europe, but he came to Atlanta in 1920, and he conducted for 4 seasons. And the orchestra, this is really interesting. The orchestra was made up between 45 to 65 musicians in the orchestra. And the personnel of the orchestra was made up of players that were in orchestras in the various motion picture houses and theaters in Atlanta, sort of like the movie industry today.
Yeah.
So and typical series of concerts ran from 8 to 12 consecutive Sunday afternoons. That was their season, and they usually played at the Lowe's Grand Theater, which is Peachtree Street and Forsyth, that area downtown. I do have a list of the names if you ever want to see them, and I know Bruce, you do too. But
I've seen some of them, and there's even a photo from 1923,
right. Yeah.
A panorama photo, and there's also a photo of an earlier group from about from the teens, I think, 1911.
However, we got to get back up to the present here.
No, yeah, right, exactly. But what happened to this first Atlanta Symphony Orchestra? I think it was the stock market crash in 1929 that kind of did them in. But yeah, okay. So then there's Anne Grace O'Callahan. She was the supervisor of music for Atlanta high schools, and in 1939 she formed what I referred to earlier as, I think it's the In and About Atlanta Orchestra,
right.
and it drew on musicians from high schools in the Atlanta area. Their first concert was in 1939, and Joseph Maddie. Does that ring a bell with anybody? Mm-hmm. He was the eventual founder, started up Interlochen Center for the Arts. So he was the first conductor. But the main conductor was Maria Weisgerger, who taught music at Girls High School, which Jane was a member of. And so she was the main conductor for several concerts. Henry Sopkin did conduct a couple of times the In and Around Orchestra. But probably of those two ladies, the third one is really considered the founder of the orchestra, and that's Josephine Sanders. She was president of the Atlanta Music Club, and as I said, she's often been referred to as the symphony's founder. So
yeah. So
is that any relation to Governor Sanders?
That's a great question. I don't know.
I wonder.
Someone will tell.
Well, could be because he started the Council for the Arts, and he was very much into the arts, and so was his wife. So.
That's a good question. I have to check on that.
There's a note in the chat from Matt Franzak, who says he's a hello Bob, my former Delta colleague friend, and Rhonda Respis, who my wife Debbie and I met more than 40 years ago, along with Jonathan Deloy, at an after concert get together.
Oh,
that's a good memory.
Yeah. Interesting.
It's a good.
Hello, Matt.
Okay. So once Sopkin was brought here, and the orchestra was literally a youth orchestra at that point in 1945 when he started, correct?
Right.
And it was called the Atlanta Youth Orchestra, and this was the orchestra that Jane, our own Jane Finley Little, was in, who was a bass player in the orchestra, who held the Guinness Book of World Records in 2016. I think she hit that mark of being the longest serving member of an orchestra, the same orchestra, for 71 years. And so I was actually talking about, we have one member who was in the orchestra with Sopkin currently, and his name is Michael Kennedy. He's a bass player of ours. And Michael is, I had a chat with Michael about it, and about his time in the orchestra, which I was really interested in, because he said that he was an 18-year-old and he studied with Jane Finley was his teacher, Jane Little. Yeah. And Jane knew there was an opening, and that's how Michael got his chance to play just for Sopkin. And he went and he got a job in the orchestra at 18. And at the time it was part-time, of course, and they rehearsed only at night. And rehearsals were mostly at Georgia State, and they played concerts at the Municipal Auditorium. Is that right, Bob?
That's right. That's exactly right.
Amongst with the elephants, right?
What Michael said was amongst the elephants, the wrestling matches, and the ice shows. So they had to share nighttime with that, and with those folks, and they rehearsed elsewhere. So he said it was kind of interesting. Most people had day jobs. A lot of people were band directors. John Head, who was the principal trumpet, and is still around. He and his wife were both in the orchestra for a long time. Martha and he were longtime players in the orchestra. He said that he was his band director, Michael Kennedy's band director. Right. And then suddenly he's in orchestra with him, with the Atlanta Symphony. And I should say that this was Sopkin's last year. It was the year that Michael got in, which was in 1965. That was his first year in the orchestra, was Sopkin's last year. So he didn't have a lot of memories, and he was 18. So, but it's just kind of interesting that we still have that connection with that first orchestra, the first iteration of our orchestra.
It was interesting. I read Marty Sauser's recollections of the Sopkin years. Marty was a concertmaster in the 50s and 60s. And he was talking about, Sopkin, and also I've seen some of Sopkin's own writings. And Sopkin had a plan. He was known as a clinician for high school kids, but when he came here, his plan was to make a professional orchestra. Right. So one of the first things he did after those concerts in 45 and 6, he showed up at the local union board meeting on June 15th, 1946. And he said, I want to get some professional players in here to help grow my orchestra. And of course, there was some controversy about, well, they're professionals, they don't play with amateurs, we don't mix them like that. But he knew that would be a problem. He was a smart guy because he was from Chicago. He was a member of the Chicago Local, which had been run with an iron fist by James Petrillo in the mid-20th century. So he knew a thing or two about union politics. And he had gotten in touch with one of the union board members, Happy Steineken, before all that. And he made a plan for how to navigate this, what to ask, how to ask the questions. I've seen the board meeting minutes from that date. They're very limited, but in Sopkin's own memoirs, he talks about how he finally just pulled out the national rule book, and it said, conductor of a symphony orchestra can mix people like this because it helps grow the union and blah, blah, blah. But the important thing, so they got it approved. And over the next few years, he did add the professional players more and more. And so there, yeah, it's
a great story. Yeah.
And as he was leaving in the 60s, he was talking about how to make a full-time orchestra. Exactly. He described exactly what the schedule would look like. So he knew the whole time he was building what his end goal was, which is remarkable.
He was headed there. Yeah.
Considering he came here to help high schoolers sound better.
Rhonda, do you want to add to that?
Well, he was, from what I hear, he was quite a taskmaster too. There was a story about him jumping off the podium and grabbing the violin of one of the outside violin players and tuning it and then giving it back to her. And apparently he was asked later why. He said, well, first of all, conductors do that, which I'm not so sure about. Second of all, that woman will never play out of tune again.
Oh, that's great.
And I'm sure Robert Spano and some of the other conductors would like to do that sometime.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I'm looking at a few things on the chat. Gloria Jones Allgood is on, and she said, Jane said, I think referring to the municipal auditorium, it smelled interesting is how Jane described it, which I'm sure was the case because of all the. Kiki Wilson is on, and she says, I understand that at the municipal auditorium during concerts, you could sometimes hear the Coca-Cola bottle falling through the Coke machine during the concert. Oh my gosh. We've come a long way, y'all. Bob, you wanted to say something?
Oh, well, no, you mentioned at the beginning that it was the Atlanta Youth, the Atlanta Youth Symphony. And then this is kind of an important date, 1947, they felt like they had grown up, and they changed their name to the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra. And that first concert, after it was named the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra, was January of 47. But what's interesting about that concert is Sopkin conducted, I think it was a Wagner piece, but also he brought in Hugh Hodgson, who the School of Music is named after UGA, and he was a pianist here in the Atlanta area. So and he's been part of the orchestra ever since.
Wow, incredible! Yeah,
you can find on YouTube a recording of Hugh Hodgson playing his own concerto with the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. Wobbly tape on there, but you can find it. I think Sopkin's plan was talking about hiring band directors. There were a number of really good musicians that he hired. Robert Harrison for concertmaster, Merwin Chrisman for principal horn, Carl Bevins, dearly loved man, principal clarinet, and then of course Warren Little came in as principal flute. Miss Atlanta, Tora Ream Pinkard, was principal bassoon. She was Jean Ream's sister. Jean played in the orchestra.
Oh my gosh.
47 years. And also, I hasten to add, Bill Moore on tuba, who was, of course, Michael Moore's father.
Yeah.
Michael Moore.
Our tuba player
I
for
didn't
50
know
years.
that. That's a new one I made. That's great.
So there were some really good players that he he brought in, and he had a vision.
Yeah, you know, the thing that is interesting to me, actually, once talking to Michael Kennedy about it, was that when he came in the orchestra in 65, Jane was the only original person from that 1945 orchestra.
Is that right?
Already in 20 years, that it had
Mhm.
already changed over. So I thought that was kind of interesting. It seemed, maybe it didn't seem fast because it's 20 years. And if I think back to 20 years, you know, even now I've been in the orchestra 16 years and the orchestra's changed up quite a bit already. But I was just, he worked
If all
fast.
this is boring to you, know this one. Henry Sopkin was Mel Torme's first cousin. So when you're roasting your chestnuts by the open fire this Christmas, and think about Henry Sopkin.
Did you find that tidbit?
That's funny.
That's,
You know, it really, it's amazing. And 20 years is not that long. Take
Yeah.
it goes by in a flash.
yeah,
This orchestra has grown so fast. I mean, if you look at any other orchestras, I don't think you'll see an orchestra growing quite as fast as this one has, to quite the level that we've come.
right.
And really, this is not that many years. It's a couple of generations. You know?
Yeah. I wanted to say one other thing that happened. I just saw that David Breitberg is on. He says hello. Hi, David. One other thing that happened, and maybe Bob, you can speak more eloquently about the Orly crash that happened on June 3rd, 1962. And this was during the very end of Sopkin's, the last couple of years of Sopkin's tenure here, where basically 122 members of their Atlanta arts community were on a trip to Paris to hear, you know, they were all it was our entire, pretty much the arts organization, and the plane crashed in Paris or outside of Paris at the Orly airport, and we lost a very large number of patrons, which ends up being devastating.
Yeah, and Laura, and by the way, Matt, if you're still listening, it was a Pan American 707 aircraft. But anyway, I digress.
Delta,
Of course, you know that.
Laura, in all seriousness, it's setback philanthropy in the Atlanta community for a generation or more, and it was also that same year that the mayor was trying to get through a bond referendum to have an arts center at Piedmont Park, and that was voted down in huge numbers. And then 2 months later, you know, the Orly plane crash. So it was a tough night. It was a tough year.
Right. And it was also a catalyst for where we play now.
Right. Absolutely.
And we'll talk about that. We're going to move on to Robert Shaw now. Unless anybody has anything further to add about Henry Sopkin's years.
Well, I just want to say one thing about the Municipal Auditorium. The challenge was it held 5,000 seats.
Oh yeah.
It was acoustically defective, and it was just a tough ticket to sell continually. So that was, and I think that's what slowed the growth of the orchestra for the last 10 years. I'm talking about from like 55 to 65. They didn't have it was still a part-time orchestra, and they never really had a decent performance hall or a permanent place to play. So
right.
I'll just quickly say too that the Rodin sculpture that's there on Peachtree between the High Museum and the Memorial Arts Building commemorates that crash, and it has the names of the people, I believe, there.
Yeah.
If you're going to pay your respects.
Yeah, just very, very, it's tragic. I can't even imagine what that was like for the members of the board and the orchestra and the families and all of that involved in the ASO at the time, the whole ASO family at the time.
well, it was the art museum too.
The art museum too. Yeah.
It was really the art museum.
It was
right.
A lot of people.
Right. Which leads us into the Robert Shaw years. And of course, there was a year gap in there between when Henry Sopkin left and when Robert Shaw came in. And I believe that that the person who filled in was somebody who Sopkin had brought in, right? Robert Mann.
Robert
He was in the
Mann.
orchestra.
Right. He was our interim for a year
Right.
because
And he,
Shaw had another year on his contract in Cleveland. So
right. And so Shaw started in 67 through 88. He was here for what looks like 22 years. And then I think he stayed on after that as well. But he really had a very long and active tenure with the orchestra, taking the orchestra from part-time to full-time, and just a charismatic guy. And this is where, you know, we want to hear lots of stories and things that y'all remember. He brought Telarc in, started a wonderful collaboration and with the orchestra, and he was quite progressive. He,
Laura,
yeah,
when I came in, I was, well, I didn't, I was too young to realize what I'd really gotten into. But it didn't take me long to realize that there were not nearly as many women in the orchestra, in other orchestras, as there were in the Atlanta Symphony. He hired a lot of women, and it was just unheard of. Orchestras were mostly made up of men at that time. And the other thing was that he was so progressive thinking in including all communities, the Black community, all races, and trying to be very inclusive and trying new music, trying to introduce new things to the city.
yeah, he entered the scene here smack dab at the height of the civil rights movement. MLK living here on all of the activity of the human rights movement here in Atlanta. We were just ground zero, and Shaw was the right person for that time. I think just like a perfect setup for including all kinds of diversity, women, African American folks. The chorus is here in town that he educated and brought into the fold, and welcomed African Americans to the orchestra, to the chorus as well, I believe, correct?
Absolutely.
Which
Oh,
was
yeah.
not a thing.
I mean, he was colorblind as far as that went.
Yeah.
I mean, it was all about quality. He just wanted quality. It didn't matter what color or what race or how old you were.
Right.
I like the fact that he came for two reasons, and you mentioned one of them, Martin Luther King, but he also loved the writings of Ralph McGill, the editor of the newspaper. And I remember my dad saying, there's two things you need to learn. You need to learn how to read a baseball box score, and you need to read the editorial page of Ralph McGill.
Amazing.
But I think that's so powerful because Shaw's first concert here, Ralph McGill had a nice column the next morning, so I'm sure that was kind of touching for Shaw to read that.
So that's another thing I wanted to say about Bob, is that Bob Scarr is from Atlanta, and I think that him being part of the community and being somebody who was inspired by the orchestra at a very young age, is another reason that we feel this responsibility and this ownership to our community, because we got Bob Scarr from this, and so many other people here who are supporters and longtime supporters and longtime groupies. And I would call Bob a groupie.
Hey, Laura, I was so blessed with a band director that really, and this is a big shout out to educators, and he brought me down to an ASO concert in 1970, and I didn't realize the importance of it, but it was Leopold Stokowski's performance here, and I always remember it looked like he was conducting while sleeping. I'm sorry, it looked that way, but it was like I never will forget what was on the concert. It was Hovannes, Mysterious Mountain, I think, and then like a Beethoven Fifth, I believe. But it just made a big impression on me, and
Yeah.
Well, that's what education does,
And then in 71 and 72, I got to do a side by side with Harry Maddox and Richard Hansberry and Don Wells, and yeah, it was something that I'll like I've said before, you never forget your first love.
Shaw was a theologian too.
What'd you say, Rhonda?
Shaw was a theologian.
Yeah, yeah. He wasn't just a music conductor. He was a philosopher, a theologian, educator.
Laura wanted to say something. She's got her hand up.
This is a great time to talk about the chorus for just a second.
Yeah. Kiki's
one of the things that we did as a group over the last 3 or 4 weeks is realize how the institutional momentum of the Atlanta Symphony is largely dependent on the incredible support that it has seen from its donors and the people that are on the board. So I reached out personally to Kiki Wilson, who, if anyone listening to this has not seen Robert Shaw, Man of Many Voices, it's a film about Robert Shaw. And we didn't want to spend a lot of time today just on this little overview because Kiki's film is so inclusive and it's just wonderful. You have to see that. And the chorus, my heart goes out to the chorus. We would like to have another banter sometime just talking about the chorus, because you really can't talk about the Atlanta Symphony without the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra chorus.
Right.
So we're really excited. But Kiki, Robert Shaw came here and the chorus followed. I mean, it's amazing to me. I know many, many stories of people in the chorus that moved here because of Robert Shaw. And it was great to talk to Kiki because she was married to Frank Wilson and they met on an international trip. And she was living in Chicago, and she said to me, Kiki, I hope you don't mind me telling this story. He wanted her to move to Atlanta because they had fallen in love. And she said, why would I leave Chicago for Atlanta? And he said, because Robert Shaw is there.
Right.
That clinched it, didn't it?
That was it.
That was it.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
I also reached out to Brad Curry, was chair of the board and longtime supporter of the Atlanta Symphony. And he just could not stop gushing. Robert Shaw is his hero. And you'll hear that 1,000 times, 10,000 times, the people that knew him really well.
I remember one time in his rehearsing the chorus, and Kiki will remember this too, I'm sure, and pointing up to way up to the top of the last row or the second to last row of the chorus and say, "You're flat." It's like, how? It's 300 people. How does he know that one person was flat?
Yeah,
incredible.
I just talk a little bit of an overview about the kinds of things that Shaw instituted, including the diversity, including adding the chorus, which debuted in 1970. The hall opened in 68, right after he got here.
Right, Laura, and just real quickly to that point, sorry, it was October, I can't remember, was it October?
Yes.
Yeah, October 19th, 1968. And that wasn't the first subscription concert, that was the first concert, an inauguration concert for the new hall. But I thought it was so sweet what Shaw did and how he programmed that concert. It was an all French composers in honor or in memory of the early plane crash and in honor of the French government that helped us, financially to get going. So I thought it was like a Poulon Glory, I believe, and it might have been the Revel. What's the afternoon of a swan of a fawn? Yeah, I think it was that. I'm trying to think what was the other French piece. But anyway, it was it had to be a touching
Right.
concert.
Right. One of the things that I was really interested in was that Shaw also instituted a couple of resident composers, which we don't see all that much anymore, but T.J. Anderson was the resident composer for the 1970 season.
And T.J. is living here in Atlanta now. Yes.
Right. And I don't know if you want to talk about him at all. Anyone?
Well, he's wonderful. And I've had him talk to some students and give them some wise words. And he was right there in the middle of it all. And Shaw, played a lot of his works and premiered a lot of his things.
Yeah.
Tremonisha was an opera.
Yes.
He wrote. It did very, very well.
Yes.
and he's also an expert on the ragtime music.
Oh
He's
yeah,
given me
that's where.
lectures on that period.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Huh.
really, really great.
Uh-huh. Um, Another thing that was instituted also was the Carnegie Hall debuts. We had a debut with the Carnegie Hall, the ASO at Carnegie Hall in 1971.
Bob, I just found the first program, that program
Oh,
Nice.
today
cool.
also for that
Huh.
Carnegie Hall concert.
And in 1970, December of 1974, the circle is complete with the ASYO being formed by with Michael Palmer being the conductor, which I think is so interesting that an orchestra that started as a youth orchestra how many years later? Like 30 years later. It's tremendous, really interesting. And we still support a youth orchestra that is very much a part of our lives, where we support them. We have, a lot of us have done, I think Rhonda was a coach for years for the
Oh,
violins.
many years. And I think the youth orchestra,
And
I
Laura.
don't quote me on this one, but I think that it's one of the only youth orchestras that's actually sponsored and rehearsals and performs on Symphony Hall stage
Yeah.
of a major orchestra.
Yeah, they're right on stage. I remember giving a couple of my bassoon players a little slap on the patty because they were running backstage and being disrespectful. And I said, I waited 43 years to get here. You guys are lucky enough to be here. Treat it with reverence. This stage is sacred to me. Like it took me forever to get onto this stage.
You know what,
So,
Laura, that it's sacred to a lot of the kids too. We have people that are playing with professionally with the orchestra now who grew up with the Atlanta Symphony
right,
Youth Orchestra.
right. We have a couple of
So Chun Su and
Chris
Chris
Pilgrim
Pilgrim,
and
Sarah
Marcy.
Park, and who?
Who did you say?
Sarah Park,
Sarah
viola.
Park. Yeah. And Marcy Gurnow is our second clarinet player and was one of Laura's students. So there you have it.
Sorry, Marcy.
Chelsea McFarland, who is a horn player in the orchestra, was also a recent grad. She was in school with my daughter, actually. So
It says something for the quality of the orchestra and the education.
yeah,
Really does.
it's
Because
wonderful.
auditions are tough to get into the orchestra. They're tough.
Yeah.
There's no room for favoritism at all.
Right. Yeah. In 82, the orchestra became full-time, a 52-week paid orchestra. A huge milestone for, I think, all y'all. Laura, was that the year you started, Laura?
Yeah, my first year was the first year that it was, and it was the first year that you got your own room on tour.
Oh, very nice.
I remember saying, boy, you don't know what it was like before, right?
That's great. And in 85, Alvin Singleton began a 3-year appointment as resident composer, another African-American composer that we still play, whose music we still periodically played. I've played several of his. Yeah.
Oh, there he is in the middle with
There
Betty
he is.
Fuller and Drew Fuller.
Two longtime
This-
supporters.
We'll
This is
talk
the
about
news.
Betty later.
Yeah.
This
Got
is
it.
the newsletter from my first season in '85.
Oh my goodness. And in 88, the first European tour with the famous East Berlin concert you were all on that. So lots of great memories about that.
Incredible. Going through Checkpoint Charlie and seeing the Berlin Wall, and it's just amazing. That was
With the chorus, we were all
and
the
singing and playing in East Berlin and getting
Awesome.
10
Wow.
curtain calls. Shaw had to drag the concertmaster off stage, and people clapped in unison
I watched
until
that
the
video.
last person left.
6 concerts in 6 days in 5 countries.
Yes.
I mean,
I love Derek Henry's. He was the music critic for the newspaper, and when the last concert was in London, and he asked the stage manager, "Do you think that the British will come to their feet?" He said, "Nah, they don't ever They don't ever stand up for anything. And 2 hours later, they're on their feet. So, what a tribute to the chorus and orchestra.
Yeah, so super cool. Kiki says you need to mention 3 requiems in Carnegie Hall in 3 nights in the early 70s.
Ugh.
Wow.
Wow.
You
With
know,
amateur
there was
singers.
we didn't talk about this before, but there was an aborted tour. There was
Oh,
a tour that we were supposed to take to play requiems in the churches that they were premiered in, I believe.
In
And it
Paris.
was all set up. Everything was ready
Right.
to go, and we couldn't go because of the terrorism that was
We
going on.
bombed Libya. That's why.
right.
That's right. Yeah, that was in 1986.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
they just
What?
scrapped that whole tour.
it scrapped the whole tour.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
that
I'm
was so
pretty sure
sad.
that that's how it came to be that we were able to do the Beethoven Ninth recording for PBS. We played Beethoven 9 live. You can see it now on the virtual stage on our
Right.
website.
And also the Berlioz Requiem. You did a few days later. That's online now too.
Did you
That
do Beethoven 8?
Very
Beethoven,
interesting experience. I was that was my first year in the orchestra, and before the Beethoven Ninth, the brass players walked out on stage and played the Copeland fanfare for the common man. So yeah, I won't say exactly what he said, but Tom Whitty, the second horn, had a comment as he walked off stage. Just about how stressful that was.
oh
But
man, I'm
but
sure.
you can see the performance. It's actually really good.
Hey,
It's
I don't mean to digress, but that
online. I'm
oh,
sorry.
I'm sorry.
In the editing on the website right now, there's the Beethoven 9 and then
Yeah, right. Right.
the fanfares at the end.
There's a very cool timeline that Bob has done with the help of, did Nick help you, or did Bob?
I'm so glad you brought Nick Joe. He was the annotator here for I guess from the 70s to about 2005 or 6, and I consider him my mentor. I learned so much from him in trying to build the archives, because he's got a wealth of knowledge and experience and performance history, and just such a dedication. And he was my go-to guy right from the very beginning, and in trying to organize and process the collection.
Does
And
Nick still sing?
Yeah.
And I
yes,
know, I think he does. And
yeah.
Stands right behind me.
Jones, by the way, for those of you that are listening and what we're talking about. But
And then
John Coolidge too, both
John
sang.
Coolidge and John White. I mean, those are the historians that I rely on.
Yeah.
And but I did want to do a quick shout out, Laura, if you don't mind,
Yeah,
to Kevin Fleming. And we have the archives that are now over at Georgia State. There just really wasn't enough room there on the 4th floor, and we didn't have the equipment to properly care and process the collection. But kudos to Kevin Fleming. And if you ever want to go over there, we've got the complete audio files back to 1974, digitized almost, and even a lot of several Sopkin recordings, including the 10th anniversary. But and most recently, just one more thing about Kevin, he applied for a grant to the Digital Library of Georgia to digitize 30 of these scrapbooks. And it comes to about 2,900 pages. He got the grant, and they're going to digitize them in January, and they'll be all online. And but he's been a wonderful.
Wow, that's great
as well. So
yeah, I don't know, Laura. Do you have you had talked to a couple of people, Brad Curry and Jim Landon.
Oh yeah, and Jim Landon. We got to mention Jim Landon. He was actually general counsel for the WAC, for the Woodruff Arts Center, for 30 years, and he's so passionate about music. I just have to say, when I first played Mahler's 4th Symphony, I couldn't sleep that night, and I prayed to God that I could meet the man that wrote that. And I've always been in love with the idea of time machine. And our little banters for the last month have been like a little time machine of the Atlanta Symphony. And it's so fantastic to reach out to some of these people that have really carried the orchestra to this point. And I think especially now it's really poignant for anybody to hear this, because we're dead stopped in our tracks. I
Yeah.
mean, we're not playing live concerts. We are making music, but I think it's really good to get the perspective that this is just a hiccup, just another hiccup. And this orchestra is going to go on
We've
because
gotten through it before, many years, you know,
the
many
community
times.
that supports it. So Jim Landon is really fantastic, and we had a really wonderful talk. He finally got to sit on the board, and he started a little community group called the Symphony Club. You know, and I love to hear about all these
Mm.
groups that are within the community that really help things along. And he said it was all fun and no work, unlike the board, right, which is a lot of work. And he said the great thing is about at least a dozen of those people later joined the board. So I mean, that's the
Fantastic.
kind of thing that
Yeah.
happens.
It's outreach. That's outreach.
Ah,
Really.
outreach. You mentioned the magic word.
The magic words, education, outreach. Yes.
Well, in 1997, which I remember very, very well, we had, we just played the Olympics, I believe. And I don't, you know, somebody else is better at time things than I am, but there was a contract negotiation and we ended up on strike. And when we finally settled, the musicians really wanted to get into the community more. You know, they felt like this was something we really needed to concentrate on. And Alison Vogelmore, when she was the CEO here, the president, said, "Okay, we're going to start a committee, an outreach task force to start this some kind of outreach program," and appointed Betty Fuller. And you saw the picture of Betty Fuller that was Bruce showed you to be the head of that committee. Well, Betty is a pistol. I mean, she's incredible. You know, I mean, everybody just laughs because they love Betty so much.
All roads lead to Betty Fuller.
All
There we
roads.
go.
That's the truth. And who was it? I think Brad said that there would be no ASO without Betty Fuller.
Yeah.
And I believe that. She actually filled in for 2 years as the president and ran the symphony in between people that they got, you know. So it was
Yeah.
really, she was amazing with that. And that went on. The task force actually managed that symphony outreach for 10 years. And then it went into more of a something that the management took care of.
Right.
I mean, we're still doing those things. And as a
Right.
matter of fact, I think now in the COVID time, there are people going out doing all kinds of outreach
Right.
just because they can, you know, they're trying to get out as much as they can into the
Yeah.
community.
A little more difficult now that it's cold, but
very
people were
difficult.
doing a lot of things outside before. So now we've sort of gotten into the Yule Levy years. So we're going to move on. And 1988 to 2000 were the Yule Levy years. And I think that how we described Laura's got an album.
Oh, there's so many with Yoel. It was
Yeah,
like
he had,
every
I mean-
other week you were recording some huge.
believe I counted 25 CDs that he did with the orchestra, resulting in, I don't know how many Grammys, Bob, under him.
And I think he was trying to record all the Mahlers, wasn't he?
I think he was. I don't
got
think
an enormous amount of them.
right.
So one of the things that he focused on was the precision and the discipline in the orchestra. And it really brought a different level of detail-oriented work, I guess that we would call it, to the orchestra. And it also gave the ASO an international presence with a legacy of recordings, is what I wrote down after kind of parsing through all the things that happened. But the legacy of the recordings is pretty astounding. And I think that what we talked about in these other three Zoom calls that we had and getting to know each other and kind of talking through all the things we wanted to talk about was that one of the things that happened with this wealth of library that he created, that Shaw created, was a generation of musicians who knew the Atlanta Symphony through these recordings, who wanted to be in the Atlanta Symphony, knew, that first digitized recording of orchestral music. Okay, so Bob, help me. Orchestral music recorded for commercial.
For commercial for commercial release by a U.S. orchestra. Yeah,
Right. So we had the
19
first digital recording. And what year was it?
1978.
Yeah. So that
Yeah,
was Marie Shaw.
yeah.
Yeah. So, but anyway, so we're, you know, we're talking about all those kinds of things. Marcy just wrote, our second clarinet. She says, "Can we mention the Louis Lane Respighi album, one of my favorites, along with Dances of Galanta with Levy."
Ah,
Yeah.
Her
And Lewis, oh, we
teacher,
remember him fondly, and we don't talk enough about him. He was wonderful,
Louis
wonderful
Lane.
man,
Yeah. Was he
and
the
did so many.
assistant? What was his?
His title was associate, and he was here for about 10 years.
Yeah.
No, it's
Yeah.
interesting.
I had a chance to go up to Cleveland a few years ago to interview him and do a little oral history, and he just had he was beginning to have some memory issues, but I would mention some names like Laura Arden or Christopher Rex, and his eyes would just sparkle, and he just loved those 10 years he was here,
He did.
Wow.
and I think he helped Shaw stay organized a little bit.
Well, he was a wonderful conductor, fabulous at coming in at the last minute.
Yeah.
And he had to do that many times where somebody was sick and he had to come in with no rehearsal and just conduct.
Right. And
He
you know,
just did
speaking
that
of
beautifully. He was
speaking of coming
amazing.
in at the last minute, Yoel Levy came in 1985 to fill in for an ailing guest conductor at the last minute, and I think that bode him well when they were doing a search for the new director. They appreciated what he did in '85. So.
Well, Levy was absolutely amazing. I mean, he did everything by memory, everything. And I mean, he was looking around. He looked at people. He saw people. He saw what they were doing. He knew what was happening, and you know, he knew the scores.
Yeah.
He was a master. He was a master of orchestral technique. What we could do under him is just astounding. You know, just a simple thing like one big staccato chord would be just like 100 people going. It was amazing.
Yeah.
And the whole thing was just remarkable. And he kept saying, and people, we joked about it, you must look up, you must look up. And of course, that's true. We're looking at music and the conductor's conducting. So it's a challenge. That's the challenge of orchestral playing. But
He was looking at everybody
honestly,
too.
his beat was big enough that you didn't really need to look up that carefully to play really, really well together. It was amazing.
It was
Laura,
very
you were going to
clear,
say
too.
something?
oh, I just wanted to mention Steve Horvath. Steve Horvath was our part-time librarian and violinist, and I don't know how many years he was with the Atlanta Symphony, but he also was quite a fine artist, and he would do caricatures which were up in the library, which relieved some of the pressure of this incredible standard that the symphony was keeping with Yoel Levy. And I think
Yes. Here you can see the sun shining. That's Yoel Levy saying, "Good morning, good morning." That's the way he began every rehearsal. And here it's tilting at windmills. This is the Moldau Hoochie. There's the Aquarius violin.
Oh my God.
It really can't show up on the screen here too well, but it's one of Steve's.
Well, I wanted to mention the guy in the torture chamber, which I think Maestro Levy knew all about this. And of course, you know, this is the greatest form of flattery, you know, to have all these caricatures. But he had up on the wall a guy with a spike under his chin, and it said, "Look up."
Oh, that's funny.
Great. You know, we cannot leave the Levy years without talking about the talent development program.
Absolutely. Yes.
So 4 women who spearheaded this effort. Yes.
Well, it came from many, many more. And
Right.
You know, but the education part of the whole program, there were, I can't remember exactly how many. There were more than 4 women, but I believe it was Marcy McTeer. It was in charge of the was the chair of the committee that started
Right.
the talent. It was called the Black Talent Program, Development Program at the time,
Right.
and the wonderful, wonderful woman, Azira Hill. And she's one of those people that you just have to love. You know, she's been so prominent in politics. You know, her husband is Jesse Hill, or was Jesse Hill, and she's just a wonderful woman. And Mary Gramling, who has been there from the beginning. And this committee started up this talent development program with 10 kids. They accepted 10 kids, and by audition, and the kids all get free lessons, free with the symphony players. They get many performance opportunities. They get mentoring. It's very personal kind of program.
Yeah.
And it's a wonderful program. It has now grown to be 25 people. And we've had many graduates going into. The whole idea was to get more blacks originally in the youth symphony, and then on into the professional orchestras, and it's worked. I mean, it's happening.
Yeah.
And it's a great program.
It seems like the last couple of years, so many of the kids that are graduating from high school in the program have gone to Juilliard, Curtis,
Major
New England, just huge schools, very accomplished. And our teachers, they get lessons from teachers in the orchestra.
And they get juries, and I mean, they
Right.
have to be accountable. I mean, they're very accountable because of the money
very
that's
cool
spent on
program.
them. But and then about halfway through, a few years later, and I don't remember exactly what the date was. I don't have it here. Gonzala, help me with that one. Gonzala Foundation.
Gonzetta. Yeah.
Gonzetta Foundation. Yes, I'm sorry.
Right. Okay.
And then Arthur Blank Foundation helped to sponsor it, and they got added Hispanic students, so that it's now the instead of the Black talent, it's just the talent development program.
Right. It's a great program that a lot of people are looking at right now.
Well,
as a model.
Yeah, and Laura, you're right. In February of 2019, the ASO sponsored a Mellon Foundation, a Building Bridges Symposium, and we had probably 55, 60 participants from several of the conservatory schools and parents. I mean,
cool.
Other orchestras were coming here to understand how did we do this, and how did you put it all together. I think that shows a lot of credit to a lot of hardworking folks over the last 25 years.
So in 2019 they had their 25th anniversary of the talent development program.
That's right.
Fantastic. In July of 96, the ASO also performed at the opening ceremonies of the 1996 Olympic Games under the direction of composer John Williams. That was here in Atlanta. Another big, huge feather in y'all's cap that I missed. Thank you very much.
And the Youth Symphony played the closing ceremony.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
Which was really cool because my daughter was in the Youth Symphony at the time. So.
Kiki says that there is a performance for TDP tomorrow on virtual stage. I saw that.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Let's see.
Hey, Laura, one more just quick thing.
Yep.
The 91 European tour with Levy.
Yes.
It was 3 weeks. It was like 11 or 12 European capitals. I think you did 16 concerts in a row.
16 concerts in 15 cities, right?
Everybody got sick.
Yeah.
Everybody got sick?
Everybody got sick.
Oh.
Yeah. I mean, do you remember that, Bruce? I mean, it was like this cold was going around.
No.
I have my little booklet here with all the reviews and things in it.
Fabulous reviews.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's the danger of being in, on a bus or in a plane or in hotels. And
but I have to say that Yoel Levy really pushed to give us the best conditions we could have on that. I remember staying in very nice hotels and being very well treated on that tour. It was very difficult, it was a lot of concerts and a lot of traveling. but
Yeah.
And
I got
fabulous
a,
concert venues. I mean,
yeah.
yeah,
the
I
Music
got a,
Verein, and I mean, how can you forget that?
yeah.
I got a picture of a few of you, including Yoel Levy, wearing a Braves uniform or baseball cap because that was the year that the Braves made it to the World Series in '91. And
I think we were in
uh,
Toulouse. I don't
okay,
remember, but I think we were in Toulouse, and we stayed at.
Actually,
They got
no,
a tell.
we were
What
in London. We were standing
was
along the
London?
tent with the Big Ben in the background, and the brass players went out, and I think we played "Take Me Out of the Ball Game" or something like
Oh,
yeah,
cool.
yeah.
Oh,
that. But
fun.
yeah, the Braves were in the World Series.
Oh, neat. Oh, cool. Yeah. We need to move on. Let's move on to Robert Spano,
Yay!
our current music director, 2001 to the present time. I think that the thing we talked about with Robert, and the thing that I kept coming back to, is the word collaboration, and forward thinking with Robert. Just creative as all get out. And the collaborations are there's so many collaborations that he is delved into while he's been here. The first one being with Donald Runnels as the principal guest conductor, and the first time that I think that the first time the orchestra ever had two conductors and
Right.
that were collaborative partners.
Sir Donald Runnels. Now.
Sir Donald Runnels, indeed. And then also with the war room planning, which was apparently unique, yeah? Bringing all parts of the staff and administration together in one room and calling it a war room. It sounds like it has a negative connotation, but I remember fighting to keep that name.
And that was for programming and just,
yeah, it's just, I thought it
general
was fantastic.
conversation about what was going to happen.
Right, so they got everything. Go on, Bruce.
I'm sorry. It's interesting because leading up to that, one of the things that Alison Vogelmore, as executive director, president, was all about was when there was a project, she would get cross-constituent groups together. So it was about collaborating, not with silos, but with people from different constituencies within the organization, board members, staff members, musicians, chorus member musicians. And so that was kind of the thing. And so as the plan developed to choose a new music director, it kind of concurrently developed that they would have a group, more of a duo, or even what was called a creative partnership, which included Robert and Donald and Alison as part of sort of a triumvirate to kind of lead everything in a cohesive fashion. Mm-hmm. And the war room, of course, was part of that. They brought in more people to battle things out, so to speak. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think Robert Spano brought things to the orchestra that were just very unusual. I mean, the productions that we hadn't seen the likes of before. Pretty incredible. Anna DeMar took us to Ojai.
Yeah.
And, I mean, some of the things that he's really done is they're absolutely, it's opened up the world of new music to Atlanta, because Atlanta didn't like new music. It didn't want new music particularly. And I think that he had a way of finding music that was really accessible and fun for the audience, and they grew to like it. They started to, a lot of the audience say, gosh, I wanted to come to the concert and see what he's doing next.
Right.
Well, yeah, and actually some of the audience members walked out of a concert.
Oh,
really?
Yeah, well.
I just have to mention, there's a case study.
That wasn't Robert's fault, though.
No, it's not. But there's a case study that was written by a student at the Western Ontario University about the November 8th, 2001 Sea Symphony concert. And
Vaughan Williams.
I think the way I understand it, it was a member of the ASO chorus that suggested that the ASO perform the Ralph Vaughan Williams Sea Symphony, and heck, why not? You guys had never performed it before, and but they wanted, like Bruce was talking about, they wanted to they had a long range plan, and they wanted to bring in an innovative conductor and new music and new ways of reaching out to audiences. So they added the video, which I wasn't there, but maybe Bruce and Laura and Rhonda can comment on that. But
Brianne Turgeon.
What? I'm sorry.
Brianne Turgeon just wrote in the chat, Sea Symphony. One guy stood up and said, "This is crap," and walked out.
Well, according to what I've got, he said, "Boo the bastards."
Oh my God, that's amazing.
Yeah, it was bad.
Well, and yet Robert did that the entire time he was here. All kinds of creative productions, theater of a concerts that we did, all kinds of very cool.
And that's the only one that I know of that wasn't successful.
But it was successful.
It was.
Yes, it was in its
The
own
next
way.
the next two nights were sold out.
Yes.
I remember going by, I had gone out with a friend to have dinner after the first night, and Robert and Allison were in the office till like 2 a.m.
Yeah.
My clarinet. And he really takes it on really seriously. It was a very difficult time, and it was really great to see it ultimately succeed.
Right. And I did a little, I went to the AJC archives here, and what they said the next day in the newspaper, I'll just read it. It's real quick. What was inescapable about Thursday evening's performance with the ASO was the seismic effect Spano is having on the ASO and its audience. Like it or not, we're on the leading edge of the 21st century symphony orchestra. Atlanta is a fun place to be now.
It is a fun place to be,
Yeah. So,
I'm very sad that I actually retired in September. I'm happy to have retired, but I'm very sad because it is a great place to be. It's forward thinking. It's happy. The orchestra's happy. The people in the orchestra are happy, and they act like it. They play like it.
Absolutely the best woodwind section I could ever imagine playing in. Just incredible people, incredible musicians, and so generous. Laura is one of my heroes, and you are. And I just remember coming here. What?
Just because I have your name.
No, I have your name. But I just remember, just that feeling of being an older player. I got this job when I was 43, and walking into this incredible machine that was just so beautiful. And all I had to do was just ride the waves and learn how to do it. And Carl Nitschke, who was the principal bassoon at that time, helped me navigate so well. And I could never have imagined a more generous partner in crime, just an amazing mentor. Would always help me with reeds, trying to figure out, how to get a darker sound in the wind section and get it to blend, and taught me about articulation, just unbelievable ways to blend with the group that just I always will treasure. Just a really special group of people.
What's fun is sitting in the middle of the orchestra and listening to all this.
Yeah.
I mean, we have the best seat in the orchestra, in the whole place, because it's right there. I listened to Laura right in back of me, this fabulous section right in back of me.
Kiki Wilson in the chat says, and yet Sea Symphony won a Grammy. And Sally Can says the chorus altos dressed like babushkas. Is that true? Sally, is that true?
We can't see them.
Yeah, Rhonda, you'll have to ask Rhonda. Laura and
I can't see them either. I've got my back to it all.
Yeah.
And besides, there was too much to pay attention to.
Yeah. Does anybody have any closing thoughts? We're getting right to the end of this time. It's almost 9:15, and anybody have anything they want to
Go ahead,
in
Bruce.
closing say?
Well, yeah, I mean, we've probably told this story incompletely because we're just a few people here talking about 75 years of everybody who comes in to be a part of the orchestra, whether it's a substitute for a week or a manager for 5, 6 years, or board member for 20 or 30 years, or an orchestra member for 71 years, or whatever it was for Jane. Everybody comes in wanting to do good. They want to contribute to this art form. So I think the story of the evening is really, it's about, as we said, institutional momentum. It's like, where are we going? Where have we been? Where are we going? What is our inertia that will propel us through good times and difficult times? So I know that we've told this story incompletely, but it's a story that you can research for yourselves too. And it's every city has a story like this, but Atlanta's is very interesting, and it's our 76th year now. This would have been the 50th year of the chorus, and it's just killing me that we can't do those big works. But we'll get there.
We'll do it.
Have this momentum.
Yeah, I think that this is, definitely could be, if we flip it and think about COVID as being a catalyst and an opportunity to do things and set new goals, and to try and be inspired by the things that we did in the past and find new ways to look forward to what is to come.
There's always good that comes out of hard times, always. And we'll all find it.
We'll get there.
Want to give another shout out to Robert Spano, because I feel like we sort of ran out of time with him.
Yeah.
And I do think that the way he is a colleague is going to be the future of our orchestras. I really think, and you can see the orchestra changing and forming their own hierarchy with that kind of a colleague approach, which I really think is going to be what orchestras will demand, more like a European orchestra. I think they're more inclined that way. So I think everybody adores that man. So
we do.
You can't say that about many music directors.
That's right. Anybody else want
Thank you very much for emceeing this and doing such a great job.
I learned so much from y'all. It was so much fun. And Bob, thank you so much for all your time getting all the archives together, and all the recordings, and all the work that you do, and your love of the ASO. You inspire me to learn more and to just treasure what we have. And
it was an honor to be here, and I just so appreciate the time we've had together these last 4 or 5 weeks.
I was gonna say, I told them last night that we should do this every month, because it's just so darn fun to talk with y'all. It's been great. I really appreciate it.
Maybe we should put some wine tasting with it.
I know. I intentionally didn't drink any wine today. Great restraint. Thank you all. And thank you everybody in Facebook land. We really appreciate you joining us tonight. Have a great night.
Bye-bye.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.